Hello and welcome to the big picture. The Union Cabinet has cleared the implementation of the 7th Pay Commission for central government employees. The new pay scales will benefit over 1 crore employees, including 47 lakh central government employees and 53 lakh pensioners. The overall hike is expected to be 23.5%. The additional expenditure on the government will be to the tune of rupees 1.02 lakh crores annually. However, already the employees are up in arms, declaring that they will go on strike as this hike is considered to be the lowest in the last 70 years. The 6th Pay Commission had recommended 20% hike, but then UPA government had doubled it to 40% while implementing it in 2008. Meanwhile, industry and corporates as well as some analysts have welcomed the announcement as they feel that this will give a boost to the economy and will also help growth. We will discuss the decision of the government as well as the opposition to it and also what will be the fallout of it. To discuss this, I have with me TSR Subramanian, former Cabinet Secretary, Government of India, CM Vasudev, former Finance Secretary, Government of India, Shivkant Mishra of Bharatmiya Mazdoor Sangh, and Prof.Praveen of the Center for Economic Studies and Planning, JNU. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Subramanian, how do you look at this decision of the in the light of the opposition which has come up immediately?
Well, the opposition is par for the course. I've been closely associated with the implementation of the last three, apart from this one, apart from the 2008, three earlier ones. The opposition is par for the course, and also in a sense, every decade the Pay Commission recommendation become a ritual. I don't think substantively things, except for the numbers, it has not changed too much for the last 30, 40, 50 years now. So, firstly...
no, what do you mean it has not changed?
The system, the way of approaching it, the kind of formulas being used, etc., etc., etc. The current situation, as I read it now, is that for the Group C and Group D in Government of India, don't forget that what happens here, within 2 to 3 years, will spread to all over India, to all the state governments. For the Group C, for the Babus and for the Chaprasis, drivers, etc., etc., the rates in government salaries are much higher than
in the private sector.
In addition, there is security of tenure. In addition, there is also CGHS. If you take these, they are 2 to 3 times better off in an extremely poor country. So the question for Group C and D would be, one does not want to be negative about it. People, after all, people should be well paid and they should be happy. But the fact is that this is a poor country. We've got to look at it in the totality of what others are getting, etc., etc. I think this is the broad approach. On Group A and B, I think the problems are different. Now, by and large, except the very top in the private sector, where the numbers are astronomical, if you leave that sort of creamy layer out, much of it is fairly on par if you take into account also security service and also CGHS and other benefits. The question for me is, does everyone bring the output as required? Does it deserve the salary?
No, we will get...
These are issues that I think we will discuss.
It's an important issue. We'll come to that later. Mr. Mishra? Mr. Mishra, what is the... because your BMS has been one of the first ones to oppose it or not to have a problem with this.
The problem which after the announcement of this cabinet decision, something has been floated, but the darker side of the salary has been floated. First of all, the
darker side has been?
Darker side of the salaries.
Yes.
Means that this will increase the GDP, that they are well paid, that they have gained much. In spite of assessing the things on some real basis, that these increase in pay, which we call it, have come out after 10 years. First of things we have to. And in that very course, the entire country has seen the inflation. Now at these times, there is a slowness also. And all these employees are well salary, income tax pays also. 96% of these belongs to the lower categories, minimum from the family of Kisans, from family of others. In that issue, but they have started comparing it with the private. What is difference between the private and government sector? That whatever be their salaries, but they have to give their services apart from the salaries. They have to work out on hazardous conditions also. If we do not see the secretariats, even the railways, the postal, they have to work on very hazardous conditions, first thing. Second thing is that the vacancy position. The pay commission itself has given in the report that 25% vacancies are still short.
So, but what is your objection?
So what is the workload over
What
them?
is your objection to this?
The objection is that we have demanded the minimum salary.
Yes.
That should be very proper. We have don't we
The
didn't
minimum
demand it.
salary now is about 18,000.
18,000, yes.
And you think it is not enough?
It is not enough. Not enough. It is not adequate. Actually, the question of adequacy is also there. If we are protected under the Constitution by Article 309, 311, we have a recruitment rule also. We come from the talented universities, we come from the every educational institution, and there's this crossing the commission's test, interviews, thereafter we come here. And government is also trying to, the talents must be invited there. So all these things were not taken. And foremost thing is that the entire Group D staff has been done away by the 6th Pay Commission. The minimum salary, whosoever is drawing in the government sector today is not an illiterate. He is a high school person, which is the class 3, that is, you call it a clerks. And the 7th Pay Commission wrongly, and IIM Ahmedabad has wrongly compared it with the helper. Helper is an illiterate there in the private sectors, but here he is educationally qualified the test of the commissions, and then came, and you are comparing with the helper and just saying that you are drawing more salary.
Okay. Mr. Subramanian is smiling, but I'll come back to him later. Mr. Vasudev, what will be the impact of this? 1.02 lakh crores, which is going to be the additional annual expenditure. Of course, the finance minister had kept aside, I think, about 70,000 crores this year itself. So you think, what will be the impact of this?
But firstly, the point about the 24% increase.
23.5.
I think you have to keep in mind that after 10 years, if there is an increase of 24%, it probably can be argued that it's not a very high increase. But at the same time, if you consider that in the current salary structure, there is an inflation-linked dearness allowance, and on top of that, there is this 24% increase, then it is not a small increase also. So on balance, I would say that but the problem is not the increase per se. I think the problem is arising because this is done after 10 years. And all the impact of the 10-year period is coming in 1 year. In that sense, the fiscal impact is coming in 1 year. The unions have got a ready-made platform for flexing their muscles. And that is the type of problems. And on top of that, the Pay Commission has tried to compare across sectors, army and scientists and professors and civil servants and engineers and all those under one sort of umbrella, which is really not comparable. So it is a very outdated system of having a pay commission for all categories of government employees after 10 years. I wish the government to reconsider this and do away with this 10-year ritual and have a regular every 1 year, every 2 years increases sector-wise, and then that would be a better and more scientific way of doing it. Now, the impact of the Pay Commission on the fiscal is certainly pretty high, about a lakh crore or so that you have mentioned. And on top of that, if the Pay Commission scales are adopted in other central government institutions, in the universities and the research laboratories and colleges, and also then in the state governments and the state government undertakings and the cooperative societies, the number is going to be more than 2 lakh to 3 lakh crores or so. And that is not a small amount, and it is certainly going to constrain the fiscal space for public investment. And that is going to be a challenge for the government, how they are going to manage it. Either they are going to relax on the fiscal deficit numbers or trying to find some other way to deal with it. But certainly it is going to be a very difficult task to have this large amount of revenue expenditure and also retain the fiscal space for public investment. But on the other side, I think calculating the fiscal impact is not such an easy arithmetic number, because there's a lot of money which goes back into the government coffers via the income tax, which the employees will pay, maybe 15-20% of that. There will be central excise duties, there will be service tax on areas where the employees will be spending that money. So a lot of it will plow back. So maybe the amount that the government has provided this year, about 70,000-80,000 crores in the central budget, may perhaps be adequate, I feel. And for the economy, I think there would be certainly a fillip in that sense. There will be a stimulus for growth. There will be increased demand for various FMCG items. For real estate is going to be a big beneficiary, I feel. And also the auto sector may be a big beneficiary. And maybe savings rate, because the government employees and others in India, the people do tend to save for the rainy days, so the savings may also go up. So there are a lot of pluses also in terms of the impact on the economy.
Okay.
But the troublesome part, I think, is more systemic, as I said in the beginning, that having all this in 1 year after 10 years across the board will lead to a lot of anomalies, and maybe the amounts will certainly go up.
Okay. Praveen?
Yes.
How do you look at this?
You see, there are several issues. I mean, first is organized sector versus the rest of the economy. Now, we should not be doing that comparison as part of, while discussing pay commission and so on. But in general, it is indeed the case that the country does not have an incomes policy. And in that sense, what goes to the organized sector obviously is a kind of a deal which is much better than what the rest of the country gets as workers and so on and so forth. But if we get out of that debate, right, we are not getting into those issues. Now, in terms of increase, how much does it really amount to? Now, compared to the 6th pay commission, if you look at the minimum
the government
hike,
is claiming 23.5%.
No. Let's, okay. I mean, the 23.5, and that we can break into the salary and the allowances and the pension and so on and so forth. So, on pay, it is about 16%, allowances 63%, and pension would be 24% and so on. But if you look at the category which probably is most aggrieved, right, which is the minimum pay band there. Now, 6th pay commission, the hike was 54%. This time it is 14.3%.
For the lowest?
For the lowest, for the minimum pay category. So, obviously, there is a substantial, kind of anger there. Partly because what they had got in 5th pay commission, 6th pay commission, it's nowhere close to that, number one. Number two, if you do a very simple calculus that, okay, last 10 years, what is the rate of growth? Even if you forget about, let's say, compounding the growth rate and so on, simple growth rate, 10 years, at least, let's say, 70% increase, right? What are the workers getting? Right? If it is 14.3% or even 16% or even 24%.
But what about what Mr. Vasudev spoke about, inflation-linked DA, which is already there?
All this is adjusting for inflation. The 14.3 takes into account, in real terms, what is the increase. So, Mr. Vasudevan's point is already factored in what I'm saying. Right? Number three, this whole what is known as fitment factor. Yes. So in that sense, 2.57. So if you go by what Mr. Vasudevan was saying, so if you look at the adjusting for inflation, etc., in fact, 2.25 is already taken into account to keep it at par. So it's just additional 0.32% that you're talking about. Right? So 2.57 in that sense effectively becomes in real terms, in terms of increase, just a small amount. Right? So one can see why they are aggrieved. Right? So that is something which is understandable. Also, claims like
I
that
think
is
just
historic,
one clarification. I think.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Vasudev.
No, just one. Of course, I mentioned about the inflation indexation in the DNS allowance, but on top of that, they are also getting increments every year. And they are not insubstantial. Every grade of pay has increments, though they are getting that. So there is inflation indexed DNS allowance, there are regular increments, And then on top of that is this increase that we are talking about.
No, if we look at
That
the
is,
base
this is a
year,
structural increase.
Mr. Vasudevan, if we look at the base year and the current amount which is being proposed and do a very simple calculation, in real terms, what is the increase? It is 14.3%. You know, there's no jugglery there. That is pretty simple. Right? Now, you mentioned the figure quoted by the finance minister,
yes,
that 47 lakh employees. Actually, it is 32 lakh employees, because sanctioned is 47 lakh, but currently occupied is just about 32 lakh. So even, you know, so there are some of these things, and then there are lots of other issues which are, you know, as I said, no devil is in the details. So if you go through the whole report and look at a whole lot of other issues, so that's one set of issues which I think we need to just keep in mind. Of course, as regards what happens to overall demand situation, currently there is
growth.
Yeah, the growth issue. On that, the response from industry associations is from, let's say, modest kind of expectations regarding growth to some pretty, you know, robust kind of expectations as well, particularly for some sectors. Auto is one, real estate is the other, and so on and so forth. So yes, on growth, it is going to have a positive impact, but what would be the extent of that will, of course, depend on the numbers, etc.
Yeah,
right?
Mr. Subramanian, you know, it is being said that in the last several years that we have seen these pay commissions high, you know, wages have been hiked, whatever, they may not be happy this time, but it has gone up. Is that one of the reasons why intake in the government has come down? Because, you know, there is a huge lot of, as Praveen was pointing out, 32 lakh, 47 lakhs, they're talking about, there are actually a lot of vacancies.
Which is true also, but on the other hand, technology has come. Computers have come. Probably they are not.
So
they are not being used
Are you
enough.
saying that we don't need those?
Probably we have to do a balancing, and we cannot have a situation where we take employees in for the sake of taking employees in for employment purposes. It has to be for functional
vacancies. When they say vacancies, aren't those vacancies considered?
Vacancies are, yes, considered in the budgeting. The point is a valid one. That while the government is projecting a particular picture, we also, the associations are also projecting the opposite picture, extreme opposite, and probably some. Can I make two other points here? This was implicit, what Mr. Jha said just now, Professor Jha said now. Once upon a time, the government sector was highly underpaid. When I joined service, I think Chaprasi's salary was 27 rupees. So I think what has happened in 45, in those 50 years, the lower government servant, which is bulk of government servant, sharply has gone up, and also faster rate than the organized private sector. Don't forget, 92% of employment is in the unorganized sector.
Yes.
And another 40% of employment is in the totally unorganized sector of the agriculture, etc., etc. Now, I think in a balanced discussion in India, we cannot focus on 3 or 4 or 5% for income. One. Second is, the formula, Vasudev had a very correct argument that it is now a very diverse economy. You cannot compare apples and oranges, etc., etc. Bring defense on one side, bring scientists on the other, bring professors on the other, etc., etc. We've got to be more differentiated in our approach.
Pay commission approach has to be abandoned?
No. It has to be more nuanced. It has got to be more focused. But I'm making a slightly different point. Till now, output performance has not been a single significant criterion. I did a report for education sector now. The salary of a teacher, government salary, is about 55,000. It will become 70,000 now. And in the private sector, it's about 15,000. And there is no way we can compare who is a good teacher or a bad teacher. So the system just doesn't differentiate whatever. Again, the same thing, we look, when we do comparisons, we look at the Secretaries in Government of India, which is only 3% of the total IAS in India. You look at the others, and you see what is the responsibility level, what the so I think a new dimension has to come in some way, keeping in account the kind of political interference angle, making sure objective assessment is possible. I think it is now necessary to bring the issue of output, performance, etc., and linked it in some way with rewards.
Mr. Mishra, would you agree with that?
Yes.
I am not. Performance linked.
Actually, I want to say on that point only Mr. Subramanian was in the bureaucracy, and he perhaps knowing that it is a very hierarchical one. Government sector is a hierarchical one. So if something doesn't happen, then you cannot say that this person has done it or not it. Because if that was the scene, then IAS were to be blamed first. But they are not being blamed. Apart from that,
Mr. Subramanian, that's an interesting point he's making.
apart from that,
He
In
is
a
not-
hierarchical
he-
structure, how
he
do you,
is-
how
he
do
is-
you
he is not questioning the need for performance
Yes, yes.
measurement. He is saying the difficulty of measurement, and therefore it has to be addressed now.
No,
It has to be a new theme in our discussion.
I
How
want
should
to
we-
add something that for the assessing the performance, their annual performance chart is prepared every time. Every year.
ACR, the
And,
basic,
and their CCS conduct rules also. Someone is not doing duty, he is charge sheeted there. Even
No, but
after
what what Mr. Subramanian says is all these things are there, but the pay is not linked to what is there.
Yes, yes, yes. The pay should not, because whatever pay has been fixed, it is under normal positions. Pay is not linked when you are performing high. It is under normal conditions. This should be your pay that 7th Pay Commission has written. So, expected performance should not be compared with non-performers. We are not perform. Because if Modi government is doing something and making everywhere effort of that I am doing development, on whose cost? Private sector is not doing that. Not services everywhere, everywhere where flood comes, everywhere anything comes, it is the government employees which goes there. So how can they say that we are not performers? And in that basis, our salary should not increase. My question is that if my salary is increased, increase the salary of private bodies. Why there should not be a pay commission for the private sectors? Why should not be there a pay commission for the unorganized sector? Why should not be there? Because doing away with pay commission will solve not problem, because resentment goes on. Now the very organized sector pay commission came, but the resentment is there. If there is no pay commission, then lot more of resentment will be there.
That's an interesting thing.
Interesting thing. But then,
Why-
don't forget that there is no profit motive here. You can't measure profit. Where if the driver doesn't perform, if the company doesn't perform, he loses his job. And therefore, don't compare beyond the point here.
Between the private and the-
But on the basis of salaries, we are now comparing. Once upon a time, this was the argument that don't compare performance. Now we are now comparing salaries, but we are not comparing. So basically, Gada Vota, there's no difference in the system.
So, Mr. Vasudev, this whole business of performance linked, as Mr. Mishra has a point. He says that, private sector, why shouldn't private sector have a pay commission? Why are you saying that there shouldn't be a pay commission here?
Well, in private sector, of course, the affordability is a major consideration, and therefore the remuneration structures are based on what the company in the private sector can afford. Unfortunately, in the government sector, affordability is never the argument, because we are running a situation, we've got almost 3% revenue deficit. So whatever increases we are doing is not coming out of affordability, it is going to lead to additional borrowing. After all, this impact of 1.5% on the fiscal deficit, what does it mean? 1.5% of GDP is the extra borrowings that the government is going to do to be able to bear this expenditure. So the affordability argument, unfortunately, is never there whenever government expenses are concerned. We are only talking about need and adequacy and this and that, but affordability is never a factor in the discussion. But I want to make a different point, or maybe a related point. I think every pay commission has tried to use this occasion of giving salary increases and increase in allowance for ushering in certain administrative reforms also, because there are so many administrative reforms that are needed. There are too many layers in government. There are too much overstaffing, in fact. There are a lot of departments which have outlived their utility. They have become redundant. We've got a very inefficient central government health scheme to usher in a scheme of health insurance. So last pay commission also did the same thing. But what happens in government is that all the good parts of the pay commission recommendation, which relate to giving away higher salaries and more allowances, they are quite readily accepted. But the more difficult decisions, which are some sort of a bitter pill as part of the overall sweetening that the system is doing, those are left untouched. So I don't know. This pay commission also has, if you read between the lines in the details, there are some recommendations of in giving some merit-based promotions. There is some the assured career progression. There is some element of merit to be introduced in that. There is some element of merit to be introduced in giving increments. So small steps they have recommended, but nobody is talking about that.
Nobody is talking about that.
So if you are going a pay commission every 10 years or what a frequency, then you should also try to use this opportunity to usher in some administrative reforms, because it's always good to balance the two.
Absolutely.
You add a bitter pill to the sweetening of the pill.
Absolutely. I think, you have made a very good point. I'm sure, Praveen, you agree with this.
Yeah,
but, it doesn't happen in this.
Exactly. You see, the thing is that it doesn't happen for several reasons, but one of the most important reason is the difficulty of doing it. For instance, measuring performance, right?
Is
linking.
No, is it difficulty of doing it, or is it the lack of political will also?
No, I mean, as I said, there are several issues there. But
No. Let me correct my point. I am not talking about measuring performance of individuals. I am talking about more structural reforms. In this sense, doing away with certain layers in administration, doing away with redundant organizations, doing away with redundant departments. These structural ones are a little more, they don't have those practical problems. Of course, they require a little more political will.
Absolutely.
But of course, I agree. To determine merit of individual persons in the government system is very difficult.
Okay.
It's very difficult because because it's a team which is working.
And,
that
also
was my
in terms
point.
of redundancies, etc. Let me just make one small correction.
I'll come to you, sir.
Which is, recently I was doing some survey in Uttar Pradesh. In the Land Revenue Administration, the current vacancy is about 80%. Now, we are talking of grade 3, grade 4 kind of employees, no? Now, if you have that kind of lack of personnel, forget about any maintenance of land records and things like that. So, if we need to go department by department, and Mr. Subramanian is one of the finest persons to, and Mr. Vasudev
No,
also,
but
they
just
can tell us
to
a great
clarify,
deal about this.
vacancies are a legacy. Vacancies are a legacy. They were then when system was working on a certain basis. Now we've got so much IT in the system.
Exactly.
In land record, so much IT. The manual work required is much less.
Absolutely.
So the number of vacancies that are required has not been determined by any government, whether state government or the central
But
government.
those vacancies continue on paper. That's the whole
IT
problem.
that has come into use of government.
So if you do, listen, with due apology,
they are continuing as a legacy for years. Those vacancies are there.
But
there is no harm coming by
record,
not filling up those vacancies.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Asam, but once we have good records in place, then I can see, how all this computerization will help. But the groundwork has to be done by somebody, and as of now, the situation
Subramanian,
is pretty
very quickly, sir.
Yeah,
but please take it. Please take it from me. Take it from me, who has worked in UP also. That lack of manpower is not a constraint for doing what you feel needs to be
Both
done.
of you are from UP.
It is just the systemic efficiency.
Okay.
It is a systemic efficiency.
Okay,
it is
sir.
a systemic efficiency which is the problem.
Okay,
Not lack of manpower or lack of resources, I say.
One point which has not been brought out, I agree with you. In the government system, it is not easy to measure performance, particularly at the higher reaches, district magistrate, SP, etc., etc. But when you come to functional departments, when you come to railways, when you come to post office, to teachers, we have not made the attempt at all to link learning outcomes. Therefore, and 90% is there. I think the attempt must also start.
The attempt must start somewhere. Would you agree with that, Mr. Mishra? The attempt should start somewhere?
Yes, sir. Attempt is already on. Attempt is already on. I come from the postal department, and fortunately, lot of IT technology has been introduced in last 2 years.
Right.
In the leadership of Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad. What I feel is technology is also not going when it is vast.
Okay.
Well, technology is not helping also.
Okay.
And the manpower is very much necessary for every organization, whether it is technologically through. One thing I want to say,
we are completely run out of time.
Confrontation with government which has come now.
Yes.
Because it took 2 years to negotiate. Then after two bodies aparted, the union aparted that side, government gone that side. What in 2 years you have done?
Okay.
Why you didn't show your constraints directly to the unions? This is my constraint.
I think on that note we need to end. This is a contentious issue. Every time a new pay commission award comes, it's contentious. We'll wait and watch how the government will handle it. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another edition of Big Picture same time tomorrow.